We had a very wet spring with many and frequent rains, but June 29th just about sums up the whole summer of 1993. In a normal year, by June 29th, you've reached the highest water levels that you'll achieve in any year, and after that point, the rains quit and the lakes start to lose water rapidly until the fall. This year on June 29th, the lakes appeared to be bank full, at least for a normal high water year. Little did we know that June 29th was going to be the turning point between a normal summer and the great flood of 1993. After the ice went out of the lakes in April, on April 27th, Big Spirit Lake was at 19.4 feet, and on April 29th, West Okoboji was at 23.3 feet. But with the heavy May rains, Big Spirit Lake was up to 25.8 feet by June 1st, and West Okoboji was rising accordingly. We had a very wet spring, and with all of the lakes already full, many people were starting to wonder what could be done to release the water in and around the lake's area. Some homeowners had even started sandbagging. Well, June 29th started off as a rather pretty day in the Iowa Great Lakes region. We were soon told that there was a storm front, a violent storm front moving our way. By 4:30, that front had arrived at the Iowa Great Lakes, and our beautiful, tranquil, early summer day had degenerated into a violent storm. Officially, over 4 inches of rain were measured. Unofficially, spots had over 7 inches of rain recorded. Winds of 70 mile an hour and plus came roaring in at us out of the east or east-northeast, and the waves were enormous, especially on the west sides of the lake. The roads in the Iowa Great Lakes appeared to be closed during the storm. Travel was not advised. There was very heavy lightning. The electricity went out in most areas in the Iowa Great Lakes, and suddenly we all realized who was the boss. It was nature that would reign supreme on June 29th, 1993. The storm was broken into two separate entities. The first storm came and went, and rainbows came out, and the traffic started to move again in the Iowa Great Lakes region. But just when we thought everything was better, we looked off to the northwest and saw the heavy cloud-to-ground lightning and the shelf clouds moving our way, which indicated high winds, and we knew we were in for it again, and our local weather people also told us we were in for it again, and everybody went for cover one more time. One small boat broke away from its dock over by the bridge at Okoboji. And floated across the lake during the storm, and during the start of the second half of the storm, this boat crashed into Pillsbury Point.
Sure did.
The floating state pier was blown off of its mooring lines and was blown at about a 45-degree angle from the state pier circle. The crowds were coming down to Arnold's Park to look at the damage from the storm, and the news of the damage traveled quickly. Rain quit the second time. We found that the boat was not destroyed at all. It had been protected somewhat by crashing into a tree that had fallen into the lake at Pick's Resort. The tree apparently protected the boat from the rocks on Pillsbury Point. Pillsbury Point, banks collapsed wholesale at Pick's Resort. Over 120 foot of lakeshore literally dropped into the lake along with the trees. Everyone, it seemed, came out of their homes, out of their caves after the storm to assess the damage and to see if they had been lucky or unlucky, and a lot of people were unlucky due to the high winds of that storm. Taking a look at Lake Minnewaska after the storm, and this boater can't believe what he is about to see. Just a few hours ago, he was able to take his boat underneath the bridge, but the lake came up so dramatically that this boater could no longer travel under the bridge. Certainly see the effects of the raise in the lake level by watching these three young people wade through the water that has now poured in over their dock. Just looking at these people gives you an indication of what everyone felt like. Everyone was completely in awe of nature. Pick's Resort, located on the shores of East Okoboji by the Henshaw Bridge and entering into Upper Gar Lake, suffered quite a bit from this storm and subsequent storms. Quite a current moves from the Okoboji Lakes through the Gar Lakes and down through Mill Creek. Triggs Resort was one of the first areas on the Okoboji Lakes to have to sandbag to try and keep the raging waters from tearing up and destroying their beach property. We're going to take a bit of an excursion on West Okoboji after the June 29th storm, and we'll start here at Pillsbury Point and at Pick's Resort. You'll see quite a bit of shoreline damage, quite a few Trees and shrubs and bushes have been washed into the lake. The docks appear to be, for the most part, underwater, and the boat hoists look as though they have sunk. And you'll also notice that already some of the homeowners have taken their boats out of the lake. We're looking at the old Civilian Conservation Corps stone bench on the Pillsbury Point area. Incredibly, the water was right up to the bench. In normal years, you have about a 5-foot drop down to the lake. Both sides of Pillsbury Point had high, steep hills, and they suffered terribly from the effects of the heavy rain. Limekiln Point is located at the very southern portion of West Okoboji, next to Browns Bay. Limekiln Point has very nearly the highest banks on the Okoboji Lakes, and consequently suffered as much damage as any one. As you traveled around the lake after the June 29th storm, you noticed all sorts of lakeshore damage. The worst damage was located in the areas with the highest banks, it seemed, but it wasn't restricted to just that. We saw areas that were beautifully landscaped that had washed away, and we saw low-lying areas that also washed away. So no one was immune, it seemed, to the floods of '93. About the only areas that didn't receive much damage were the areas that were covered with grass and shrubs and bushes and trees. Those areas seemed to hold back the erosion factor better than any of the landscaped areas. We're now visiting the Emerson Bay area. You'll notice the boat that was turned over during the storm. More of the damage of the storm of June 29th. Roads were closed, at least temporarily. This particular road is on Highway 71 and 9, going east out of the town of Spirit Lake. The spillway area between Big Spirit Lake and East Okoboji Lake. V. Rogers, an Iowa National Guard executive and engineer, arrived at Spirit Lake and took charge immediately. He coordinated consultations with a variety of officials to develop a project to relieve the pressure from Big Spirit Lake against the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad grade at Orleans. This project would eventually involve the Corps of Engineers, Lynn Wallace, the Dickinson County Director of Emergency Management, and his team, the Iowa Department of Transportation, the Department of Natural Resources, the Dickinson County Engineers, and law enforcement officers. Lieutenant Colonel Rogers also contacted FEMA and sought financial aid to help pay for the project. Monies from the Army Corps of Engineers Emergency Fund and FEMA would pay for the $3.5 to $4 million project. Governor Branstad pledged that the state of Iowa would provide any monies not contributed by other federal agencies. First area of extreme concern during the rising high waters in our lakes. Big Spirit Lake had floodwaters damage the property there more quickly than the Okoboji Lakes did, and it was decided that more water had to be released out of Big Spirit Lake down through the Okoboji Lakes. The spillway was the natural area, and it was overtaxed by the floodwaters, and sandbanks had to be put in place to at least attempt to keep the floodwaters out of the nearby homes. A news release from Governor Terry Branstad on July 10, 1993 reported that President Bill Clinton declared 11 Iowa counties federal disaster areas. The President's declaration came less than 24 hours after Governor Branstad requested help in dealing with massive statewide flooding. The north shore of Big Spirit Lake is an area of flat, sandy beaches. It's an area for picnickers and swimmers alike. Almost all the beaches on the northwest corner of Big Spirit Lake were inundated with water and were washed away, literally, by the floodwaters. The picnic areas were washed away along with the beaches. At the height of the flood, it appeared that the beach areas of the northern part of the lake were destroyed by the floodwaters. Everything was washed away, all the sand was gone, huge boulders were moved about as though they were pebbles, and you didn't recognize anything along the lake shore. The grade at the state line on the north end of Big Spirit Lake was under over a foot of water. Part of the road actually washed away, and all of a sudden Big Spirit Lake and the waters to the north in the Minnesota area were all one large body of water. The Templar Park area on the west side of Big Spirit Lake was one of the first areas to feel the effects of the flood waters. There were homes located on North Templar and South Templar. These homes were located in very low areas, and they were the first ones to be flooded. Some of these homes were in the floodwaters up to 3 months. visiting the Blue Water Beach area on the north end of West Okoboji Lake. This flat area was one of the first areas on West Okoboji to be flooded. You can now see the Triboji Beach area. You'll see that most of the boats are in the process of being removed from the lake, or else they've already been taken out of their hoists. This long view off to the southeast of West Okoboji shows you quite dramatically the immensity of the floodwaters. Lazy Lagoon, a man-made area, suffered early on in our floods. This man-made area was very, very low, and in fact, a couple of years ago, this area had to be dredged because you couldn't get a boat into Lazy Lagoon because of the low water in our lakes. What a difference a couple of years makes. This year, the floodwaters filled many of the homes all around Lazy Lagoon. If you'll notice, the redwood deck on this cottage at Lazy Lagoon has broken free and is literally floating in the waves of West Okoboji. As you looked around the Lazy Lagoon area, you thought that you were in a war zone when you looked at all the broken docks and hoists and boats. West Okoboji Harbor was a scene of utter devastation. The floodwaters had come up and over the seawall at the harbor area. The hoists were under the water, and luckily most everyone got their boats out before they were destroyed by the floodwaters. Sandpiper Cove, adjacent to West Okoboja Harbor, was another scene of much flooding. Sandpiper Cove is a watershed area for quite a bit of the western area from West Okoboja. Friends and neighbors and even strangers and tourists and everyone else became working buddies. They all learned to sandbag together, and it seemed that whenever you needed sandbagging help, there was someone there or some group there to help you. And as you went around the lakes region, you saw many sandbagging parties in many locations. Over 750,000 sandbags were used in the Iowa Great Lakes region. Reported damage estimates in Dickinson County alone to be at $39 million. The damage would have been significantly more severe without the 760,000 sandbags placed by residents and National Guardsmen in Dickinson County. 438 homes were damaged, 193 were on Big Spirit Lake, 180 on West Okoboji, and 65 on East Okoboji. One home was a total loss. 11 mobile homes were destroyed and 97 homes had sustained major damage. Street through the amusement park is called Lake Street, and through part of the summer Lake Street lived up to its name. It was underwater. Barges worked day and night removing debris from the lakeshore. Those same barges carried enormous amounts of large rock and boulders around the lake for placement to protect the beaches. On East Okoboji, next to the bridge is the Ritz, and the Ritz was almost completely covered with water, and all the adjoining areas were underwater. All one night, the National Guard and other volunteers brought in sandbags to keep the floodwaters from East Okoboji from closing Highway 71 and the bridge between East and West Okoboji Lakes. the docks at Mao Marine. You'll see that they're at hazard. They're nearly all right at the water's level or below. Nearly all of the boats are out of the boat hoists, and the area has completely shut down. This is the period of the highest water levels at the Okoboji Bridge. This red inboard outboard is going to be going under the bridge, and even this small boat is about as large a boat as you could take through the bridge at this particular time. The lake levels were at an incredible height, and for those of us who have lived here all our lives, it was an unbelievable spectacle. Our old cruiser was a victim of the rising floodwaters. It was kept at one of our marinas in a canopied area, and the superstructure of the cruiser was destroyed as it was pushed up and into the roof area. Swing portion of the railroad bridge was very nearly in the water. The sidewalk on the west side of the grade between east and west Okoboji Lakes was nearly washed away by the rising waters and the high westerly winds that appeared almost on a daily basis. On July 12, 1993, work on the project began at Lower Gar, where the lakes empty into Milford Creek. A 12-foot by 5-foot concrete box culvert was installed. Other new box culverts were installed east of the Catholic Church in Milford on Highway A34. Another culvert was located east of Casey's at Milford on 6th Street on Old Highway 71 south of Milford. And a final culvert was located southwest of Milford by the old gravel pit. Besides these, a new box culvert was also installed at the spillway at Orleans between Big Spirit Lake and East Okoboji. New homes were recently constructed near Crescent Beach Resort. Those homes were flooded from two sides, from Emerson Bay and from the canal area. Those people put in many, many sandbags, and several of those homes were kept from flooding by a diligent use of many, many sandbags. The playground area at Crescent Beach Resort pretty much summed up the summer of '93. Everything was underwater and unused. canal system running from the Crescent Beach area over to Miller's Bay and around Gold Point State Park was completely flooded. The homes there were pretty much flooded, and it was a scene of utter devastation. Gold Point area was also underwater. The Gold Point Ranger Station was completely surrounded by sandbags. When a Lakes Patrol officer had to respond to a call, he had to spend a little more time responding because he had to put on hip waders. He had to climb over the sandbags, wade out onto the dock, wade through the water out to his cruiser, and then he could respond to his call. Some of these folks in Miller's Bay brought their sandbags in by boat, and that seemed to be a pretty easy way to bring your sandbags in. These people are putting sandbags on their dock in hopes of keeping the floodwaters from taking out their dock. In most cases this worked for a while, but eventually even those docks were destroyed. It seemed as though all the homes in the Wahpeton area, in the Millers Bay area, were surrounded by sandbags. The canals honeycombed this entire area, and all the homes suffered from those floodwaters. Even the Wahpeton City Hall was not immune to the flood. During July and August, it was surrounded by a wall of water. Okoboji Boats was a scene of a lot of the flooding. You can see the pumps pumping the water literally out of their shop. They also had about 2 foot of water in their work area. At one point, it was estimated that up to 90% of the boats that would normally be kept on the lake were off of the lake and back in off-season storage. At the Fisherman's Wharf area, you can see a scene of utter devastation. All the docks have been destroyed by the floodwaters and the currents coming from East Okoboji. Fisherman's Wharf area next to the bridge is one of the landmark areas of the lake, and people could relate to that and were amazed at the water levels there. On July 16th, the workmen, amazingly, after 5 days of nonstop work, opened the spillway at Lower Gar. Workers monitored the rising water levels from Lower Gar. They wanted to be sure that the floodwaters would not damage downstream homes and businesses and farms. Released from the lakes at Lower Gar via the new project on July 16th. On July 17th, West Okoboji was at a record high of 55.8 feet and Big Spirit Lake was at a record high of 55.68 feet. By July 31st, the level of the Okobojis was down 10 inches from its high point. The lowering of all the lakes was now in progress. Coaster was shut down for several days due to the floodwaters, as you can see. Sandbags and several pumps removed the water from the roller coaster and it was able to reopen. Most of the rides in Arnold's Park were reopened after a several-day period. And the Queen 2, operating next to the amusement park, was able to operate on a daily basis all summer long. This is a view from the point of no return on the roller coaster, and it shows you pretty graphically the floodwaters at the State Pier Circle. The Department of Transportation, in almost a military-type effort, brought in huge amounts of rock to reinforce the west side of the grade between the two Okoboji lakes. Had they not brought in all of this fill, we probably would have seen Highway 71 wash out, or at least partially wash out, from the floodwaters. pier was completely disconnected from the State Pier Circle. The floating dock was actually higher than the State Pier Circle, and the ramp connecting the two literally snapped off of the wall. Headquarters was located at the Spirit Lake High School, and during part of the summer you could see military vehicles and National Guard troops and helicopters buzzing in and out of the Spirit Lake High School area. Causing damages to homes and property, the DNR proclaimed a no-wake zone for the Northwest Iowa Great Lakes on July 12, 1993. This no-wake rule was in effect most of the rest of the summer. A vivid example of the effects of the no-wake zone on the Iowa Great Lakes would be the day that the Queen II was cruising at its new top speed of 3 miles an hour, and 2 college kids in a canoe passed the Queen II on its excursion, and that in itself lets you know how fast or how slowly boat traffic was traveling on the Iowa Great Lakes. This large truck belongs to the railroad company, and these people are welding the new tracks back together in hopes of opening the railroad through the Orleans area. Point on West Okoboja was another area where many sandbags were used to protect a number of beautiful homes. Neighbors worked with neighbors to protect entire areas from the floodwaters. Over 7,000 sandbags were used on this point alone to keep the floodwaters out of the homes. Area, you could graphically see the high water levels marked on the bur oak trees next to the lake.
I'm Herman Richter, Director of Student Affairs here at the University of Okoboji, and to say it was a year to remember, that's it, to say in the least. Gosh, what a summer here at the Iowa Great Lakes. Unforgettable to be sure. Fortunate that no one got hurt. And at the University of Okoboji, we've always said what an incredible natural resource we have here at the Iowa Great Lakes with our beautiful lakes area. But the other resource that really came through, especially this summer, was our people. That's one of the greatest natural resources we have. And boy, the people in the area and from around the area and throughout the state that came and helped us was just unforgettable. Where would we have been without Colonel Rogers and the National Guard? Gosh, the National Guard guys that came in and ladies and everybody that helped us was just something else. There are just so many heroes from this summer. People like Lynn Wallace with Disaster Services that just came through, and we're so lucky to have somebody like that take charge and coordinate all the activities as we went through just an unbelievable summer here at the Iowa Great Lakes. And wow, sure glad it's over. But you know what? We're going to look back on this time, I feel, and realize that we're going to gain from it. Here at the Iowa Great Lakes and the University of Okoboji, this area is so great. If you can communicate a need the people seem to come through and pull together and get things done. So if nothing else, it's one more example of how this area, when it works together, sure gets things done.